Hey everybody, my name is Adam and this is Adam Makes Beer. Today we are having another technique video, and in this technique video we're going to be talking about how can we pack as much hop flavor and aroma as we can into our hop forward beers, whether that be New England style, whatever you want to call it. What are some ways that we can maximize that hop flavor and aroma that we can get into the finished beer? I think one of the ways that we can do that is utilizing a cooler whirlpool, right? A low temp whirlpool. Just real quick, what the whirlpool is when I am done boiling a batch of wort in the kettle, at the end, I will typically whirlpool, I will pump that wort around that outside edge of the kettle to get a slight whirlpool going. So when I cut that whirlpool off, it'll allow all of the solids that have broken into solution really, and it'll form a cone of that stuff in the bottom of the tank. So that means I can then pull clear wort off the outside edge of the tank, right? It's just a way of me maximizing how I can get as much wort as possible out of the whirlpool. What we're leveraging here with these more modern hop forward IPAs, and when I say hop forward, I mean explicitly flavor and aroma, because really new school IPA is really just having enough bitterness to balance, but having as much hop flavor and aroma really as humanly possible. That's kind of the pursuit. When I am making hazy beer or just really hop forward beer, what I do typically do is I lower the temperature of the whirlpool. And how I do that is I will take wort off the bottom of the kettle, pump it through the heat exchanger and actually cool it down and return it back to the top of the kettle. The idea here is that I'm utilizing the heat exchanger to drop the temperature of this large volume of wort. If you're doing this at home, it's going to be a lot easier for you to do it. But anyways, I have been experimenting by dropping my whirlpool down lower and lower. Right now I have been experimenting around 170 degrees. What you will find is, and what I have found is, when you start dropping that temperature into about 180 degrees, 170 degrees, what I'm finding is I get about half as much bitterness as I typically do out of my whirlpool edition. So the hops that I'm adding strictly to the whirlpool. That's just based off my experience and my sensory. And really, I mean, if you get technical, you can kind of look at, they have curves that will show you how much bitterness you're going to generate at different temperatures. How bitterness works in this whole process is hops are added to wort and they're boiled. The longer they are boiled, the more bitterness is generated. Lower temperatures, bitterness is generated more slowly, okay? So that's the idea here. When we're trying to make these really big hop forward IPAs, we don't want to be generating tons of bitterness, but we do want a lot of hop compounds in that whirlpool, because that's what we're hoping to get to carry over into the finished beer. That takes us into our next point, which is this discussion point of kind of hop survivables, right? What we mean by hop survivables are hop compounds that will survive being hot for a while in the whirlpool. It'll survive the vigor of fermentation, because fermentation is going to kick off a lot of CO2, and you can actually smell on a fermentation that off-gassing of it. You can smell hop aromas coming off of there, right? So these hop survivables, they're just hop compounds that will last into the finished beer. I've been really surprised as I've explicitly been playing with this group of hops that are suggested for this. I've been sampling beers in the fermenter pre-dry hop, and it's crazy how much aroma and flavor is even there at that process. And it's exciting because you still know that you're going to be coming over the top with your dry hops to really help maximize things. Some of the primary hops that fall into that, and you can Google it, but they'll talk about Idaho 7, Mosaic, Bravo, Citra. Again, really desirable hops though, right? But anyhow, that's kind of the idea. So what I'm doing for these drop temperature, these low temperature whirlpools is I'm taking it, rather than saying I'm going to be whirlpooling at 211, 210. I'm taking it down to 180 or 170, and some people are pushing even lower. But the lower you go, the less bitterness you're going to be generating, all right? And especially if you lean in heavy on these high hop survivable hops, you can get a lot of flavor and aroma in before you even dry hop. And I think that's the really cool part about this. I do think it's important when you're trying to make these really hop forward beers, whether they be hazy or not, you want to be very, very tight when it comes to preventing oxygen pickup. Anything that you can be doing, if you're brewing professionally, purge your tanks excessively. Purge very well. Be careful with all of your process points when it comes to oxygen. If you're making these beers at home and you have a CO2 tank and you're bottling out of a bottling bucket, try to make sure you purge it. Clip something on there, put some cellophane over the top, and just leave a slow bleed of CO2 on top of that beer in the bottling bucket. Do anything you can. Do anything you can to really keep as much oxygen as possible off of these really hop forward beers, because all those volatiles that we want to smell, all those big tropical things that we want blowing out of the glass, dude, they're gonna go away when they hit that oxygen. They're gonna be gone just like that. So really double down on that. And my other kind of tip on this is these beers still need bitterness. Okay, whether we're talking about juicy beers or whatever, these beers still have to be balanced. So play around with that. You can have small bitterness additions, different things like that, or you can try to drive more bitterness with the whirlpool even. You can dial that lower whirlpool or that cooler whirlpool temperature up and down and kind of find your sweet spot with it. I think if these beers are not bitter enough, they become flabby. They get to a point to where they're just almost too sweet drinking, and especially when you start stacking it in with some of these strains, whether they be like the big thiolized yeast that are coming out, the GMO yeast, whatever, or even like the London 3 stuff. I use juice from Imperial. You can kind of just make a beer that's too fruit forward and too ester forward. They just kind of lose its soul and it becomes flabby, and like halfway through the glass you wish you had something else. These juicy beers do need some bitterness. So don't be afraid to have some in there, because that's going to be one of the things that helps to create that balance. I hope it's been helpful. If there's anything that you're doing as far as dropping whirlpool temps, if there's hops that you like using in the whirlpool or other processes for really delivering awesome versions of kind of modern IPA, let me know down in the comments. If you have any other questions for me about what I explained, if I was confusing, holler at me down there. Also, if you got anything out of the episode, please give it a like, give it a subscribe, and we appreciate it. Yeah. But yeah, that's the deal. Make some beer. Purge your stuff, man. Keep oxygen off of it. Dry hop. Lower that whirlpool temp.